Welcome from the D. What up, though?
Hey, okay, wait. Is there something that they do in
That's
Detroit?
it.
Like, how we got the whole West Side W and like
Oh,
what
I don't know. I
is
think
it?
I don't know. I don't know, but I do know they say "What up, doe." So that's all I got.
What up, though? Okay.
Um, so taking up some space. This is the action pack, so we're gonna jump right in. I don't know from the looks of things. I think our third couch sister is having some audio technical difficulties. If you can hear me, say you may have custody of Zaza. Okay. You heard no objections. If you got to say something, going once, going twice, verbal agreement. Okay.
That is
I
hilarious.
know. Okay. So we'll hopefully she'll get that squared away. So, I want to harken back to, I think it was last month where you had the first female all crew flight to space, and there was so much slack from that. I was stunned. I have no idea why Katy Perry got the most of it, but it wasn't the first flight that they did. It wasn't even the second flight that they did. It was really a. It was really. I don't understand. Sorry, I'm in a restaurant and there's people walking by. It was one of those where there was such intense backlash and I did not understand it. And that part I would say irked me. And it was what was so wrong about these women going to space? What was so wrong about these women? How dare they take up some space? And I think about our day jobs as women, where this is a constant thing. I'll say one quick story, then I'll let you chime in. I remember when at a former company that I was at, there was the CEO, and every month we would have our joint board meeting. So it would be two parts, the top leaders of each side of the organization coming together, and all the time the men sat in the center and the women sat on the perimeter, and the CEO sat right in the middle, and he had a flag. And people would, anyone knew, he would remind them what that flag meant. That flag is this is still the United States of America, and you are still allowed to have your own opinion. And so one day before the next meeting, I said, you know what? Let's mix it up a little bit. Let's not sit on the outside. So what did me, she, her do? I sat right next to the CEO,
Mhm.
and I would tell you, he was so thrown. He looked at me like kind of, when did you get here? Why did you get here? I just thought that was just quite hilarious. So anyway, quite relevant given last month, and then just I think what we tend to go through as women in terms of taking up some space.
Yeah.
What say you, Miss Kennedy?
I think I've sat in that same boardroom with that same CEO, and I vividly remember this is a thing that carried and stuck with me for a long time, is a female leader at this organization that I really respected, who had been in her role for a long time, was in the C-suite, um, extremely brilliant, said something in one of these meetings, and everyone on the inner circle of this table kind of looked at her and then passed it off and went to a different topic. And then they came back to it, and somebody in the middle, who was not a woman, said the exact same thing that she said coming from the perimeter. And all of a sudden, it was like a touchdown in the fourth quarter with 5 seconds left on the clock. The room erupted like it was the most brilliant thing they ever heard in their life. And I, little me, who was not a C suite executive, was like, I'm sorry, she just said that.
Good for you.
um, and I think, we came out of that room, and although the person that I felt like I was standing up for, I think somehow appreciated my naivete to do that in a room full of these people, also explained to me that she has gotten tired of trying to take up space in certain conversations, certain environments. And it just wasn't something she felt like she was going to worry about in that day. And I was like,
Hmm.
my parents didn't raise me that way. They raised me to take up space, to be intentional about what I do with that space, and to make sure that when people don't want me to take it up, I try to understand why, but I don't let it stop me from doing what I
Right.
think is right in that space.
Right.
And
So,
so I think it's par for the course that Katy Perry and the rest of these women sort of went through what they went through,
yeah.
and that there was all this scrutiny.
And so I sit here and I think about like my name underneath says Space Invader. I'm not sure what yours underneath says because I don't have my eyes on. Was it
I'm just
Space Transformer?
saying,
And I think about, for me, Space Invader is exactly what you're talking about. It is, um, I was invited into rooms early,
mhm.
young, so I don't know any different. The little boys club or the big boys club or the all boys club. I have very high masculine energy, so I'm very comfortable in that space. Um, and so, but to your point, I don't want to invade it by myself. I like to make sure that there's somebody else alongside with me to invade that space. So, but why do you think there was such backlash, not just for the space, but why do you think um, so many people may or may not take up that space?
I feel like the backlash of attempting to take up space comes from a place of insecurity. Um and not the insecurity of the person who's choosing to step out and be courageous in that moment and take up the space, but the people who feel threatened by the fact that it's being done. And that is what we get to see play out, right? Is the backlash comes from, well, what does that mean for me? I feel like we live in this environment, in this culture, this society of, if someone else takes up space, that means there's less space for me. But just like being
Hmm.
on a rocket and going out into outer space, it's endless. Right. And so the same thing is true with the space that we occupy from a corporate perspective or an entrepreneurial perspective or anything that we're doing. There's enough space for everybody. And I
That's
think backlash just comes from this insecurity of, well, if she's taking it up, then there's not enough for me.
such a scarcity mindset, and I do know um, there's three of us that sit on this couch, and and we are not we are three distinct individuals that show up very differently. However, in this topic, I think you and I are kind of tilting the couch a little bit to one side, and it's a foreign space for us to not take up space. And I wonder, and we're not alone in that. There's many women, there's many men who are allies and help to, similar to what you did, to bring in those voices that are being pushed off to the side. And so I think it's a for me, I think it's a part of my duty when, as a facilitator, which I'm often called in rooms to do, that when someone, no matter who they are, are being quiet or not taking up their space,
Mhm.
to invite others and to make space for them. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I think the both of us have this ability to create psychologically safe spaces for people to feel like they
yeah,
can take up space. And I know that that's a huge part of this, right? Is to feel like you can, and you can do it in a way that doesn't come back to haunt you in a negative way. Uh,
hmm,
and there's not a lot of opportunities where you see people who are attempting to create that psychologically safe space for others to be
Hmm.
able to step into it and take it
Hmm.
up.
Yeah.
Speaking of stepping in,
Yeah, there she
Welcome
is.
to the
I
party, Gigi.
said they will not dull my shine today. Somebody does not
Who
want
is
me to
they?
occupy the space that
Who
was
is they?
intended for me on this day.
Right.
And
Yes.
I do declare on this day,
First of all, love the pearls, love the green, and go.
And I think
Lord,
there's a hint of pink in the glasses. Yeah.
I'm tributing
Okay.
you all today. I'm here for it. I'm
Okay.
here for
Thank
you.
you. Ski. Ski
Okay,
me.
carry on. I don't want to take away from the conversation, but I do have a lot to say.
Well,
Well, I
so
have a question though, Ro, because I
yeah.
think one of the things, me in my little light bulb, right? How much of feeling like you can't take up space comes from a place of culture? How much of that comes into play, right? Because I think of cultures where women taking up space is not natural, right? And so you're not only fighting against what's happening in the room that you're attempting to take this space up in, you're also fighting against this internal thing that you've been raised under within inside of that says maybe this isn't what you should be doing.
Oh, that was for me. I think culturally, absolutely. I have had the privilege of being in circles, conversations, and spaces with many different cultures, and there are some when I will stand up, raise my hand, say something. People are like, "Oh my god, I could never," or people slide me the note to say something. I often that happens
Hmm.
gender neutral. That happens quite a bit. And I so definitely culture. I think definitely more women than men. I think there is an inverse bell curve from an age perspective. And this is probably not my math is not mathing, but I think this newer the Gen Zer, the millennials are they personal space. What they have no concept of it. They
Hmm.
will speak up, speak out, take up space in any room. Don't understand why they are not sitting at the CEO table. Expect to be sitting at the CEO table. And I'm not mad at that, quite frankly,
Well,
mostly.
it's funny that you raised that because, there is the question around how often do you get irritated when someone else is taking up space, right?
Awful.
Just saying.
Well,
So
well, hold up, hold up. Did that come with judgment that we do that?
I,
What you trying to say?
I don't know what
now,
you're trying to say.
hmm,
Shoot
if
your
the
shot. What you trying to
spaceship
say?
if the spaceship fits, ride on it.
Listen, that is
And
not my
see, that was
testimony.
that was look, that had nothing to do with you.
I was like, I'm sleep deprived right now. I'm sleep deprived.
Oh, that was good to me. That was good to me. That was good to me.
Oh
Um,
goodness.
but it's funny, just the issue around, does culture play a part? I think absolutely. Absolutely. Especially women, especially first generation women, I think it's a huge piece because you are taught to be seen but heard only in certain contexts.
Mm.
And so how you and where you are heard, because seen and heard are two different things. So where you are heard and how you show up being heard, is there's a box around it. There's a box and a bow. And I'm brushing a broad stroke right now, but I think, in a lot of, especially if you're coming from third world countries, quite frankly, there is an expectation that women have a particular distinct role, and that is not necessarily in the forefront if there are men around. Hear my words, if there are men around.
Mm, I heard
So
you.
it's funny because when you talk, and then you talk about people taking up space, and you talked about millennials, you talked about Gen Zers and what have you. You have the same. I have people who come to who are like, there's a part of me that wishes I could do it and wishes I could be that bold. But there's the other part of me that's like, sit down. You haven't earned your space yet.
Mm.
Ooh.
Ooh, let's
Ooh.
dig into that. So I go back. So I don't know if you heard the story of EJ. You might remember that the day at a particular meeting where all the women would always sit at the round the ends of the table, and one
Yeah.
day we decided to sit in the middle, and there was this flag in the middle. So, this is still the United States of America. We still have the freedom to speak, and I honestly, I look at it twofold, very literal in terms of that. Like my grandfather fought for that right.
Mhm.
I'm going to take it. And two, you paid me. You pay me regularly, and in return, I think you expect me to contribute vocally and mentally to the conversation at hand.
Mhm.
Anything less, I'm not doing my job. That's in a professional setting. In a personal setting, you know, other than being a kid and stay out of grown folks' business, there was no space. I was not trying to that and other people's business. I try to stay out of both of those types of conversations. That's not my space to
Mhm.
take.
I feel very similar to that. I do think that I have been in a room where I've heard what someone is saying and observed the space that they're taking up. And I've questioned whether or not it was used in an appropriate manner. But I also realized that I have a bias, right? And so just because I may not take up space in the way that they did doesn't mean that they shouldn't. Doesn't
Mhm.
mean that they should have kept it to themselves. Doesn't mean that they should have done it in a different forum or, in a different space. And so I try to check that bias when I start to feel that, when that bubbles up, because what I don't want to do is become like the people who didn't want me to take up space when I chose to, right? And so I always try to make sure that I'm checking my bias. But I will say that when you choose to take up space, it should be intentional and with a purpose. And it
Mhm.
should never just be for the sake of listening to your own voice.
Mhm.
And we do see some of that, right? And that is why it's so critically important that we create space for people and help to mentor them in those spaces, help to, you know, guide and direct and how they utilize the space that is being afforded for them to sit in it and speak whatever it is that they think that they need to speak about. And so I feel some ownership in that, not just the criticism that people don't always use their space effectively.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are a group of Gen Z or millennials in my office, and we were having a conversation a few months ago around that. And one of the things I asked them is, how do you show up at work, and are you showing up authentically as yourself? And every single one of them, and actually even including, I was the only one. Um, there was another person who was closer to my age, so Gen Xer. I was I was the only one out of a group of seven that was I'm me regardless of where I am. I
Mhm.
take me everywhere I go. The only dial back that I do is, like around our mamas, there's some words I may not use.
Thank you.
And that's a respect thing. Actually, even around kids, I'm not going to use them. Like babies, I'm not going to use that.
Mhm.
I just think that's a respect thing. But outside of that, look, I will sit and talk about fly fishing. How many times have I been fly fishing?
was like, I don't think that was on our last itinerary for a trip.
No, no, and it's not just to hear myself talk because I my voice is irritating. Um, it's more so I come from a place of curiosity. I love to broaden my thinking,
Mhm.
and I love sometimes to be provocative to spark a different type of conversation in most
Okay,
settings.
I got a question for y'all because I'm going to tell you that this is like one of my biggest pet peeves for everybody knows this, that I love the coaching that I do for Miss Universe, Miss America, all these systems that I work with these brilliant women in pageantry and in leadership. Um, one of my biggest pet peeves is apologizing for the space that you are taking up. It drives me absolutely crazy. Why do we do this? Why do they do this as women? I don't apologize for the space I take up. But why is it always like I'm so sorry, but I have something to say? Who are you sorry to? Where did that come from?
That is not my ministry.
Well, it's
EJ?
absolutely the ministry I came up in. I mean, it's absolutely because again, um, as a woman, there's certain spaces where your voice is not expected to be in. And so, therefore, if you're entering that space and you're coming with the halo over you that says, I know I'm not supposed to be here. So, in order to just, to relieve any dis-ease in the room, let me start from a place of humility. So I
Mhm.
apologize upon entering a room because that now puts that lowers your defenses because I've now deferred to you in a way. So now I have entree in the room and can do what I need to do because you're no longer exercised.
It doesn't lower my defenses at all. It actually puts me on edge when someone apologizes before they dive into what it is that they're going to say. I'm a person of say it with your chest. And if you can't, then now I'm questioning things I shouldn't even be thinking about in the course of this conversation. Right. So it doesn't put me at ease for someone to start off with an apology. I'm like, sis, what are you apologizing for? You're a queen. You should be standing in whatever it is, 10 toes down in whatever it is that you want this space for.
Yeah. And I'm gonna
But
say it louder for the people in the back. That's the type of person I am. And so and that's why I think I recognize not that we're on one end and probably not the majority of women. And in terms of feeling like there's spaces that we should not be in or should not voice our full selves in. So I recognize that and I take that as an opportunity to either show don't tell or do what was done for me, pass the daggone mic, make the space. Literally,
absolutely.
space was made for me. Like they parted the seas so I mean, I still had Similac on me and they made space for me off the kids' table at the adults' table. Um, so let's now we at the time of the day where we talk about do something. And we've been saying this where take up some space and recognize this is not for everybody. But I have a challenge for anyone who may not, where this may not come natural, and it is finding a space or a place where you can take up some space, wherever that might be. Maybe it's with your significant other. Maybe that's on a project team that you're on. Maybe that's something you're volunteering. Maybe that's when you're at a restaurant and they get your food wrong. Try some place where you can go from a 3 to a 4 and then get comfortable with that. And then maybe you can go from a 4 to a 5.
And I would also just add to that to have a real conversation with yourself about why you are shrinking when you should take up space. Like, really get to understand what part of you is uncomfortable with the process of taking up space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think there's a flip side to that as well, which is um, you don't have to always take up the most space to create the greatest impact. So,
You
um,
had some audio challenges, but you brought some heat.
I'm just saying, I'm
She
just
don't say much, but when she says something,
got a couple things to add. Because just you're the loudest, you're the biggest, you're the focal point, that doesn't mean that what you're bringing is doing or creating anything. Make sure the space that you occupy is relevant and makes meaning.
Amen to that.
listen. Okay, I know this is the do something thing, but I also want to for our not taking up space people. That mental conversation that they have in their head. Well, I don't know if this is meaningful enough. I don't know if this is impactful enough. I want to just, because, it's the classic of, okay, I need to lose weight. Let me run a marathon tomorrow. Yeah, there's this step one, buy some tennis shoes. And so, how do we break it down so that we can build up to that? And so that's the
Mhm.
only augmentation. Look, I love everything about, making sure that when you are given that microphone, make it clear, got something to say. So, anyway, make some space.
Hmm. Hmm. You talked about it. Um, everybody doesn't have a seat at the table. Scoot over and bring someone over. Bring them over. Don't
Mhm.
stop there. Don't stop there, because just because someone has a seat at the table doesn't mean that they're going to be comfortable opening their mouth, even though they're there. Help them get comfortable. Make a space physically and make a space psychologically for them to be okay and for them to hold up the space that you've created for them.
And something you said, I 100% believe this, but something you said, I feel like I'm talking to my. There's a person I have in mind that's very introvert. She's better in small settings. She's mortified at anything that's beyond like three people, and speaking and all that sort of thing. So recognizing also who you're making space for, so that they're don't shrink any more than probably what they're already feeling.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, it can't get any better than this on the do something. Please stop apologizing, y'all. Um, you are not too ambitious. You are not too sensitive. You are not too emotional. Um, you're just in rooms that were built for the kind of power you have. Like, stop apologizing. Actually say it with your chest
Mhm.
and own every single bit of what it is that you feel intentionally is purpose for that space that you're in.
Mhm.
I love the stop, because stop smiling because people tell you you're frowning. Why do you look so sad? Stop minimizing your chest when you can stick it out because they've told you that's what people are drawn to. Stop letting people tell you you're too pretty, or you're too ugly, or you're too fat, or you're too thin. You are too exactly what you need to be. Stop apologizing for who God created.
And stop
Okay.
letting them control what shoes you wear to the boardroom, y'all. That's a different story for another day, but it will make sense when we go back to this topic another time. Okay. Louboutins are okay when you take up space, just saying.
Louboutins are always okay while you're sitting down.
That was a little
A
PTSD, obviously.
little
And
bit, little bit.
and so are Converse. Just thought I shared that. Carry on.
Yes. All right, bring us home, Miss EJ.
Ooh, space is a big thing. It is big. It is massive. Jeff Bezos doesn't own it. We need to get in touch with what we control, what we own, and how we influence and encourage people to take up the space that is their God-given right to occupy. We need the space that you are occupying because we need what you have. And so I will leave with you. Don't be a shrinking violet. And also don't be a bullhorn. Be who you are called to be and occupy the space that was meant for you.
Listen, in 59 minutes, I'm about to go fight for my space in the city here of Detroit. Hey, y'all, one block over. I'm
You
coming.
got this. You got this.